We're going to be taking a fun and coastal journey along US 1. Come on, let's go! Alright everyone, today we're going to be doing the Northbound Supercut of the Great US 1. We are going to be covering all 2,300 miles of this highway, starting all the way down in Key West and going all the way up to Fort Kent. And yes, I did include the US 23 northbound video and the US 301 northbound video in this supercut, so we are going to be seeing those concurrencies here. So let us get started with this awesome US highway. But first, you're watching the TheDerpHog, where I make highways content on all sorts of different topics. If you've been enjoying it, be sure to hit that like button, and if you've been really enjoying it, be sure to smash that subscribe button so you're notified on all future videos. And if you really want to help out the channel, become a member today, where you get custom cool emojis, early access to future videos, along with one free Azure request per month. And if you don't want to become a member, you can always just pay $3 for a intersection request in future videos. Those highways will be listed down in the description below, and I'll make sure to shout you out when that video releases. So let's get on with the highway. As you can see here, this is the map of the entirety of the Great US 1, as it starts all the way down here in Key West, Florida, travels up along the eastern seaboard, and ending all the way up here in Fort Kent, Maine, at a junction with Main Route 11 and 161, right at the Canadian border. And this colored portion is the part of route that I've been on. So with that, we're talking about northbound US 1. So we begin here all the way down in the Florida Keys, and we get a Begin US 1 shield, so that is awesome by FDOT here. And after traveling through those neighborhoods, we are now meeting with the Florida A1A for the first time, and certainly not for the last. And if you want to check out a video on Florida A1A, it's in the top right corner here. I made it for a celebration video last year. And here we get our first mileage time, with Miami being 150 miles away, while other two Florida Keys are secondary and tertiary controls respectively. And here is the view of US 1 as it's traveling along the Keys. Man, that is some stunning view. And then here on mainland Florida, we're meeting with the Florida's Turnpike well south of downtown Miami, as it gets the control cities of Miami and Orlando, while we just get one north for nothing, because it probably makes sense to take the Turnpike to get to Miami from here, instead of staying on one. But since there's really nothing important between here and this meeting with the Florida Turnpike, I decided to just skip ahead here. Now we're meeting with Florida Highway 826, or the Palmetto Expressway, which will take you around the city of Miami, while we're going to be continuing heading north into the city. And on our way towards downtown Miami, we actually passed by the University of Miami. Now we're meeting with Florida Highway 9 in the southern Miami exurbs. And here we meet the start of Interstate 95, the Great Interstate 95, as we're now going to be heading onto Brickell Avenue and into the heart of Miami. And our first major junction in the heart of Miami is US Highway 41. And if you're going to check out a video on US 41, it's in the top right corner here. And here we are going through some of the scenery of downtown Miami. Now we're meeting with Florida Highway A1A for the second time, as it will travel through Miami Beach. And then here we are meeting Interstate 195 along with US Highway 27, but for some reason FDOT is only mentioning Interstate 195 here. Poor US 27. And then here we meet with Florida 826 once again in North Miami Beach, which does become, like I said, the Palmetto Expressway. And then here we meet Interstate 595 in Fort Lauderdale, which will take you towards the port along with the International Airport, while we're going to be continuing towards downtown Fort Lauderdale. Now we're meeting with Florida Highway A1A for a third time, as we're about to enter into downtown Fort Lauderdale. Now we're meeting with US Highway 98 and Florida 80 in West Palm Beach. But first, we get a mileage time with Jacksonville on the bottom line from 263 miles away. That is awesome, FDOT. It looks like that you're bringing your huge swing abilities once again, and it's on US 1. And here we meet with Florida Highway 76 in the Miami exurbs here. But our next mileage time we get Vero Beach as our primary from only 15 miles away. I mean, that's alright. Who's gonna be taking US 1 all the way up to Jacksonville anyways, but it was still cool seeing it being signed from 260 miles away. And then here we get another mileage shine with Sebastian on the top line and Melbourne now as our primary. And this mileage shine is actually on the left side of the road. That is very interesting. Here we meet with US Highway 192, which will take you over to Florida A1A and west over towards St. Cloud, Florida. Here again, another mileage shine with Cocoa Beach on the top line from 21 miles away, and Jacksonville has suddenly returned to our primary as 176 miles away. And here in Cocoa Beach, we meet with Florida Highway 404 here. Here we meet with Florida Highway 528, which will take you over to Florida A1A once again. And we can see after going through Cocoa Beach, we get Titusville on the top line, and Jacksonville is still our primary. Here in Titusville, or Titusville, we meet with Florida Highway 50 here. And the next mileage shine, we get Jacksonville now as our primary still, from 135 miles away. And I like how this mileage shine is just right in front of the Atlantic Ocean here. And here in the Daytona Beach area, we meet with Florida Highway 400, along with which will take you over to Interstate 4. And then now we're meeting with US Highway 92 as it's being signed west for DeLand and east for Daytona Beaches. Here we meet with Florida Highway 40 here, and this thing is just super funny. While I was collecting photos for this video, I stumbled across this. No, we're still heading north on US 1, it's just someone at FDOT decided to put up a south shield for US 1 instead of a north shield. So there's a Florida man story for you. And then we're now meeting Interstate 95 for the first time since all the way down in Miami, as it's been signed for Miami and Jacksonville. And our next mileage shine, we get Jacksonville still as our primary from 82 miles away. And then in Bunnell, we actually get another mileage sign with now St. Augustine as our secondary from 30 miles away. And here in St. Augustine, we meet with Florida A1A for another time. I believe this is the 5th time we meet it. It's either the 5th or the 6th. And then I decided to just skip ahead to the Jacksonville area. We're meeting with Florida Highway 9B, which will take you up to Interstate 295. And then now we're meeting with Interstate 295 personally, getting signed for International Airport in Savannah and south for Orange Park. And guess what? US 1 becomes a parallel route to Interstate 95 as we meet it in the heart of Jacksonville. And then now we're meeting with US Highway 90, and US 1 and 90 are now going to be concurrent as we cross into downtown Jacksonville. And here is a awesome view of the Jacksonville skyline as we're about to cross this bridge here. And then on the other side, in the heart of Jacksonville, we'll meet with US 17 along with the beginning of US Highway 23. Now we're meeting with Interstate 95 once again, and for some reason it has no control city going this direction. And then a ways up the road, we now reunite with US Highway 23. And then a ways up the road, we're actually meeting with Interstate 295, and it gets control cities of St. Augustine and Savannah. And let us see what we're signed for on 295. I mean, Callahan's an alright choice, but prefer to see maybe both Callahan and Folkston. But still, like I said, Callahan's an alright choice because it's where we meet US 301 and Florida Highway A1A. In our first mileage sign, we get Hilliard on the bottom line at 20 miles away. No, FDOT is being provincial here because Hilliard is literally the last town in the state of Florida. This should be Folkston. Here in Callahan, we're meeting with US 301 along with Florida Highway A1A. And if you want to check out a cool video on Florida A1A made by me, it's in the top right corner here. And our next mileage line, we get Folkestone as our primary from 24 miles away. Yay. And then here in Hilliard, we get another mileage line. We get Jessup now as our primary from 52 miles away. So they're actually favoring US 301 here, while giving us our own control of Waycross. We're now entering into the state of Georgia here, and let us see what Georgia has to offer on US 23. And we get our first mileage line, we get Waycross as our bottom line, so good job, G. Here is where US 301 splits off from us, and we're now still signed for Waycross, as 301 is now signed for Jessup. And our first mileage line after splitting off from 301, we get Waycross as our top line and Black's Hair as our bottom line at 36 miles away. No, Black's Hair is not even on US 1 and 23. It's actually on US Highway 84. Plus, it's ridiculously smaller than Waycross, so I personally argue just have Waycross as a one-liner here. No needs for Black's Hair. Here in Waycross, we're meeting with US Highway 82, and we're going to become concurrent with it as we head through the city. And then here in Waycross, we get a mileage line with where neither US 1 and 23 go, but both US 82 and 84. So these are pretty awesome cities. Good job, G. Now we're meeting with US 84, and we're going to become concurrent with it as we head bypass the city. And here's where we split off from US 82 and 84, and we're now signed for Alma. I mean, it's an alright choice. For our next mileage line, we get Hazelhurst on the bottom line at 41 miles away. That's a town where US 23 is going by itself, because we're going to be splitting off from US 1 in Alma. And here in Alma, we get a pretty cool sequential fields here. US 1, 2, 3, and then Georgia Highway 4. Here's where Georgia 19 and US 23 splits off from us, and no, that is not an error shield, that is actual Georgia Highway 19. So after splitting off from US Highway 23, our next control city here in Georgia is now Baxley. For our next mileage line, we get Lines as our primary from 33 miles away, and Baxley as our secondary. Here in Baxley, we meet with US Highway 341 along with Georgia Highway 27 here. And our next mileage line, we now get Vidalia as our primary from 33 miles away. Here in Lyons, we meet with US Highway 280 here, and it looks like we're now getting signed for Swainsboro, which definitely is the correct choice, because that's where we meet with US Highway 80. And then still, I believe in the Lyons area, we now get Swainsboro and Augusta as our primary, so that is awesome. Our next mileage line, we get Swainsboro, though, as our primary from 29 miles away. And then here, on our way to Swainsboro, we meet with Interstate 16, getting signed for Macon and Savannah, respectively. And then here we meet with US 80 in Swainsboro, and like we saw in the 80 video, we're still like a little ways out of downtown Swainsboro, so that's why it's getting signed for it. Our next mileage line, we now get Louisville. I've never heard of Louisville, Georgia before, but if you want to sign that, okay. And I believe in Wadley, we meet with US Highway 221, and are now going to be concurrent with it. Now let's see what this mileage sign says up ahead. We get Rennes on the top line, and Augusta now is our primary, so that is awesome, G. And then here's where US 221 splits off from us, as we're now heading solely north towards Augusta. And here we have a one-liner with Augusta as our primary from 30 miles away. And here in the Augusta area, we meet with Interstate 520, getting signed for Atlanta and Columbia, respectively. And now we're meeting with US Highway 78 and 278, as we're going to become a freeway around the heart of Augusta. In fact, here we can see downtown Augusta from the 78, 278, and 25 freeway. And here we are crossing over the Savannah River and into South Carolina. And immediately into South Carolina, US 25 splits off from us as it's getting signed north for North Augusta, while we're now getting signed solely for Aiken. But on our way towards Aiken, we meet with Interstate 520 once again. I mean, if 520 is like a beltway around Augusta, then it should definitely be an even number spur. And here's where US 278 splits off from 1 and 78 as we're now heading towards Clearwater and Aiken. And here in Aiken, we split off from US Highway 78 as it's getting signed for Wagner, and we're now getting signed for Batesburg in Columbia. And on our way out of Aiken, we meet with Interstate 20 proper, which is getting signed for Augusta and Columbia. And here we get a one-liner with Ridge Spring as our only control city from 13 miles away. You want to know what the weird thing about this is? Ridge Spring is not even on US 1, so why in the world are they signing it? If you want a one-liner for a city on 1, do Batesburg, Leesville, because that's the next town we'll be going to, and plus people would probably taken Interstate 20 to get to Columbia. Don't sign something not on US 1, SC Dot. In fact, here's the road that will take you to Ridge Springs, South Carolina 392, as we're now getting signed for Batesburg, Leesville. Here in Batesburg, Leesville, we meet with US 178, and we're now getting signed solely for Columbia. Apparently, we're now heading on Columbia 32 US 1 now, so interesting. Here we meet with US 378 in Lexington, South Carolina, as we're now getting signed for Columbia, while 378 is going to be heading towards Irmo. And on our way towards downtown Columbia, we meet with Interstate 20, which is now getting signed for Augusta and Florence, respectively. And here we meet with Interstate 26, as it's now getting signed for Greenville/Spartanburg and Charleston. And here's the view of the Columbia skyline as we're about to cross into downtown. And here we meet with US 76 and 378 once again at this street here. And then I decided to skip ahead to the 77 concurrency as we're now getting signed north for Pontiac, which I do not agree with that choice. Pontiac is an unincorporated community here in the Columbia area. That should definitely be placed like Lugoff or Camden or something, not Pontiac. And here in Camden, we meet with US Highway 601 and 1 and 601 are now going to be current as we head through town. In fact, in downtown Camden, we split off from US 601, and we're now going to be heading north with a concurrency of South Carolina 34. And here's where we split off from South Carolina 34 as we're now getting signed for Bethune and Cheraw, which I think are alright choices. In our next mileage time, we get Cheraw now as our primary from only 28 miles away. And here's a weird thing, as we're getting closer to Cheraw, we now get Wadesboro as our primary from 29 miles away. Again, Wadesboro is not on US 1, it's actually on US Highway 52, so why are we getting signed for a control city on US 52 before we've even met it? And here's that said meeting with US Highway 52, as we're now going to be heading towards downtown Cheraw. In the next mileage time, we now get Rockingham as our primary from 26 miles away, which I think is an alright choice. I mean, if you want to do a three-liner and put Wadesboro as the bottom line for 52, that would be cool too. And here's where we split off from US Highway 52, as 52 will be heading northwest towards Wadesboro, while we're going to be heading towards Rockingham. Our next mileage time, we get Rockingham as our primary still from 21 miles away, while Bennettsville is for South Carolina 9. And then once we split off from South Carolina 9, we get a Georgia dyslexic mileage sign with Raleigh on the bottom line from 120 miles away. That is awesome, SC Dot. Well done. So let us see if North Carolina can keep it up, because this is right at the North Carolina and South Carolina border. And here we are entering into the state of North Carolina. Oh boy. And our first major junction on US 1 in North Carolina is US Highway 74, as it's getting signed for Monroe and Laurinburg. I don't like those choices. And here in Rockingham, we meet with the beginning of US Highway 220 here. And if you want to check out our video on US 220, it's in the top right corner here. Our first mileage sign in North Carolina, we get Sanford on the bottom line from 48 miles away. I mean, Sanford is still a pretty big city, but if South Carolina was signing Raleigh, then NC should do that too. And here in Aberdeen, we meet with the 15501 here. We're now going to be concurrent with it as we head through Aberdeen and Southern Pines. And we can see that we're now splitting off from 15501 as we're now getting signed solely north for Sanford. And north at that junction, US 1 actually becomes a elevated freeway here, and our first major exit is exit 42A for downtown Southern Pines. Here we get another mileage sign with Cary now as our primary from 53 miles away. I mean, yeah, I get Cary is a pretty big city and in the Raleigh area, but it's also like basically a suburb to Raleigh, so you can just sign Raleigh here instead of Cary. And then here we pass by North Carolina 24 and 27, which gets the awesome control cities of Wellington and Fayetteville. Okay, I don't understand this at all. So you know how we saw that last mileage sign with Cary on the bottom line from 53 miles away? So they decided to just alternate to Raleigh with the same distance. So if they're basically the same distance, then you should have had Raleigh on that last mileage sign, NC Dot. Why do you do this? And here on the outskirts of Sanford, we're now reuniting with 15501 as we're about to head into town. And our first major exit on the second part of the freeway is North Carolina Highway 42, being signed for Asheboro and Fuquay, which are awesome choices. Now we're meeting with US Highway 421, being signed north for Tyler City and Greensboro respectively, and south for Lillington, which are great choices, and here is where 15501 splits off from US 1 as they're getting signed for Pittsboro and Chapel Hill. While we may continue north towards Raleigh. And first we meet with exit 79 here, and this is the most southern part of US 1 that I've been on personally. So north of here we are going to be getting a lot of recommendations. And our next mileage sign, we get Raleigh as our primary from 27 miles away. And here is the exit for old US 1 highway before US 1 became a freeway. And this road will actually take you up into downtown Apex. And here we meet with exit 89 for New Hill and Jordan Lake. And this road will actually turn into North Carolina 751, which will take you up into Durham. You're arming with 540 here, and it just gets the Kentucky treatment of the Triangle Expressway. But if you do take this ramp, there are control cities on the distributor lane. And we can see that US 1 is now still getting signed north for Raleigh still. And here we meet with North Carolina Highway 55 getting signed for Apex, Holly Springs, and Fuquay, which are all awesome choices. And here we meet with US Highway 64 getting west for Pittsboro and Asheboro, while 64 East is now going to be concurrent with us. And here is the reassurance shields of US 1 and 64. This picture here, my own picture, is where mileage sign once stood before a huge storm knocked it down. And this is what that mileage sign read, with Raleigh on the top line and Wake Forest as our primary. I mean, I like that choice of Wake Forest because it is the next major city that US 1 passes through, despite it being basically an expert of Raleigh. And here we meet with exit 101 here, Walnut Street and Buck Jones Road, and that exit will actually take you to Crossroads Shopping Plaza, which is a huge shopping plaza in Cary. And we're about to meet with Interstate 40, being signed for Durham and Benson. Ooh, Benson. And here's the actual meeting, as we're now going to be concurrent with Interstate 440 getting signed for Wake Forest now, which is a good choice. And here we meet with US 70 and North Carolina Highway 50 as they're getting signed for Crabtree Valley and Durham respectively. And this is where we split off from Interstate 440 as we're now going to be joining with our child of US Highway 401 as we're now getting signed for Lewisburg for 401. In fact, here is where we split off from US 401 as it head north towards Rollsville and Lewisburg, while we're getting signed north for Wake Forest and Henderson. And on our way towards Wake Forest, we meet with 540 once again, as it's getting signed for Durham and east for Lewisburg. That's just because of US 401. That should definitely be Rocky Mount, not Lewisburg. And here's an actual unusual thing in the state of North Carolina. Normally we would have a north alternate shield for like some of these alternate routes, but for some random reason NC-DOT decided to do a 1A shield instead of the alternate on top of this US Highway shield. Here we meet North Carolina 98 as we're about to head into Wake Forest. And at random interchanges, we are now getting signed north for Henderson because US 1 is actually a freeway in this part of the state. And here we are now merging into US 158 as we're now going to be concurrent with it as we head towards North Carolina and Virginia. Next mileage line, we get South Hill, Virginia as our primary, which I think is an alright choice because if you want to get to Richmond from here, you would probably be taking Interstate 85 instead of US 1. In fact, here we are really close to Interstate 85. And we're now reuniting with US Highway 401 as 1 and 401 are now going to be concurrent with each other. And since they're concurrent all the way up to the North Carolina border, why not just end US 401 here? It just makes more sense. And here we get another mileage sign with Richmond. Richmond on the bottom line from 105 miles away. This is totally a NC.W. Well done. And here we meet with Interstate 85 getting signed for Henderson and Petersburg. And like I said in the original US 1 video, that Petersburg actually used to say Richmond, but for some reason NC-DOT decided to reverse that decision and just do Petersburg instead. And here we are, ending at the North Carolina and Virginia border with a Welcome to Virginia sign. So we begin here at the North Carolina and Virginia border where we have a Welcome to Virginia sign. And that Welcome to Virginia sign has been around for a long time now, but I think this older one was a lot cooler. Because look at that cardinal. And our first major junction in the state of Virginia is US Highway 58, and 1 and 58 are going to be concurrent as we head towards South Hill. And our first mileage sign of the video, we get Richmond as our primary from 83 miles away, and 58's primary is Norfolk from 121. Here we say goodbye to US Highway 58 as US 58 will continue east towards Norfolk and Emporia, while we're going to be heading up through South Hill into Richmond. And on our way to Richmond, we meet with Interstate 85 here in South Hill, getting signed for Petersburg and Durham. I like that Durham for southbound 85, but that Petersburg should definitely be Richmond. And our next mileage time, we get Richmond as our primary from 73 miles away, even though this is probably more of a local road. And we're also on historic US 1 too, so that is awesome. On our way to Petersburg though, we pass by Interstate 85's Davis Travel Plaza at exit 39. And here in the outskirts of Petersburg, we meet with US Highway 460 Business as 460 Business and US 1 are going to continue into downtown Petersburg. But first we meet with Interstate 85 for the last time as it's going to sign south for Durham and north to Interstate 95 and US 460 East. Here in downtown Petersburg, we meet with US Highway 301 here, and we're going to be joining with 301 as we head north towards Richmond. And here in Chester, Virginia, we meet with Virginia Highway 10, which will take you over to Interstate 95. And I would be with Virginia Highway 288 here, which I personally believe should be Interstate 864. Or you could try to build a connector from 288 over to 295 and sign that entire area as 295. Now I mean the Chippenham Parkway, Virginia Highway 150, which will take you over to Interstate 95 and Virginia 895 Toll Road, as we're now getting signed north for Richmond still. Here in the outskirts of Richmond, we are meeting with US Highway 360 here. And now we're meeting with US Highway 60 proper as we're about to enter into downtown Richmond. And right before we enter downtown, we actually cross over Interstate 195, and we sadly have no direct interchange with it. And here's a cool picture of downtown Richmond, and it looks like that we're meeting Carey Street, so that's pretty cool. And this is on the north side of Richmond. We're meeting with Interstate 95, being signed south for Petersburg, and 64 east for Norfolk. I do like that Norfolk, but that Petersburg should definitely either be Durham or Raleigh. So on the north side of Richmond, we split off from US 301 at Azalea Avenue, and we're going to be continuing going north towards Fredericksburg. On the way out of Richmond, we meet with Interstate 295, being signed for Norfolk and Rocky Mount going one direction, and Charlottesville going the other direction. Those are good control cities. And a little ways up the road, we now get to pull through for US 1 North 4 Ashland. I mean, that's a alright choice. Ashland's a pretty sizable town in Virginia. Plus US 1 is more of a local road now, so if you want to get to places like beyond the next town, you would probably be using Interstate 95, but I think Ashland's an alright choice here. And here in Ashland, we meet with Virginia Highway 54, which will take you over to Interstate 95. Our next mileage time, we now get Fredericksburg as our secondary, with Washington, D.C. as our primary. So even though US 1 is more of a local road here, VDOT is treating it as if it was like an interstate, like as Interstate 95. And then here in Doswell, we meet with Virginia Highway 30, which will take you over to Kings Dominion. That is cool. And then about 30 miles north of that junction, we're now entering into Spotsylvania County. And our first major junction in Spotsylvania County is secondary route 606 here in Thornburg, which will take you over to Interstate 95. And this is the part of US 1 that I'm very well familiar with. So parts of US 1 that TheDerpHog will teach you about, part 2, is now coming up. And here's US 1 meeting Spotsylvania County Parkway. I bet you can't find any other county that gets its own very cool parkway here. And now we're meeting with US Highway 17, as US 1 and 17 are going to be continuing up towards Fredericksburg. And here we meet with secondary route 711, which is also known as South Point Parkway. And yes, there is an actual 7-Eleven off of this road here, so that is very coincidental. And now we meet with Interstate 95 at exit 126 here, as 95 South is being signed for Richmond, while I'm pretty sure 95 North is going to be signed for DC. And here, still in the Fredericksburg area, we meet with Virginia Highway 208, which will take you to Spotsylvania Courthouse in the Battle of Spotsylvania. Now we're meeting with Virginia Highway 3, which will take you into downtown Fredericksburg, and going west on Virginia 3 will take you over to the Spotsylvania Town Center Mall and Culpeper. And then here is where US 1 and Business US 17 are crossing over the Rappahannock River and into Stafford County. And our first major junction in Stafford County here is Virginia 218, and US 17 Business is going to be leaving US 1 to head towards Warrenton and other places. And our next mileage time, we now get Washington, D.C. as our primary still, with Alexandria now as our secondary. And then here we meet with State Route 8900, which will take you over to Stafford County Airport. And this bridge here is actually State Route 8900, as it makes an entire loop around US 1 just to cross over it. And then on our way to Alexandria, we actually passed by the National Museum of the Marine Corps. I've never been there, but it looks like a pretty cool place to visit from Interstate 95. And here we are meeting Virginia Highway 123 on the very southern exurbs of Washington, D.C. Now we're meeting with Interstate 95 at exit 161 here, and we're now getting signed north for Lorton and Fort Belvoir. I mean, those are pretty big CDPs, but I prefer to see Alexandria here because Alexandria is a bigger suburb, and plus it's an actual city, like, while these two places are just CDPs. So come on, Virginia. And then here in Lorton, we meet Lorton Road here, so that is pretty cool. And now we're meeting with the Capital Beltway, and we now get a pull through for Alexandria, which is definitely awesome. And then here in the Alexandria area, we meet with Virginia Highway 233, which is a connector road to the Reagan National Airport. And now we're going to be joining with Interstate 395 here, as we're now going to be crossing into Washington, D.C. In fact, here we get a cool view of both the Washington Monument and the Jefferson National Monument. And you can see that US 1 is going to be splitting off from Interstate 395 soon. And after crossing the Potomac, we're now splitting off from 395 and signed for 14th Street in the National Mall. And here we pass by the Jefferson Monument here. And here's a close-up view of the Washington Monument. Now we're meeting with US Highway 50 at Constitution Avenue, and we're now going to be concurrent with it as we head through the National Mall. And then here's where US Highway 50 leaves us at New York Avenue to head towards Interstate 95 and 395. And here at Rhode Island Avenue, we meet with US 29 here, and we're going to be turning onto Rhode Island Avenue to head towards Maryland. And we're now entering into the state of Maryland, so let us see what Maryland has to offer on US 1. Our first major junction is Maryland Highway 410 here, as it's being signed for East-West Parkway. And this is on one of the random junctions here in College Station. We're now getting signed north for Baltimore, which is awesome. And on our way towards Baltimore, we meet with the Capital Beltway once again, getting signed for Richmond, Virginia, and Andrews Air Force Base. And then here we meet with Maryland Highway 200, which will take you over to both Interstate 95 and 270. And then this here is in Laurel, Maryland. We're now still getting signed north for Baltimore, which I think is a good choice. And this here is a mileage time, which was taken by Tiger Raven with Elkridge on the top line and Baltimore as our primary from 14 miles away. This is a cool mileage sign, and thanks for the picture. And then now we're meeting with Maryland Highway 100, which is being signed for Ellicott City and Glen Burnie. And still in the Elkridge area, we meet with Interstate 895. And this picture was also taken by Tiger Raymond, so thank you for this picture. And now we meet Interstate 195, which is being signed for the BWI Airport. And this, again, was also taken by Tiger Raven, so thanks for the pictures. And then on the outskirts of Baltimore, we meet with Interstate 695 here, and going this direction of US 1, we only get a one-sided meeting with 695 and not a full interchange. And this here is another picture taken by Tiger Raven, as we can see that there's a view of Baltimore in the distance. And here's an actual view of the Baltimore skyline as we're crossing over US Highway 40 here. And here's that meeting with US Highway 40, and for some reason it does not have any control cities. Now we're meeting with Interstate 83, which is being signed south for downtown Baltimore, and north for a lot of street names. Now we're meeting with Interstate 695 on the north side of Baltimore, which is now being signed west for Towson and east for Essex. Well, we're going to be continuing up north toward Bel Air now. Here in Bel Air, we meet with Maryland Highway 24, and now getting signed north for Philly, which is awesome. Here in the Conowingo area, we're now crossing over the Susquehanna River and into northern Maryland. And our first major junction is Maryland Highway 222 here. And after meeting Maryland 222, we're now meeting with proper US Highway 222. And this here is the very northern part of US 1 that I've been on personally. So north of here, we're exploring new territory for me, so that is awesome. And here we get a one-liner with Rising Sun from 5 miles away. What's happened to Philly? I thought you were signing Philly, M. Dot. Why are you signing Rising Sun? here in Rising Sun, Philly does come back as our primary, so that is awesome. And we're now entering into the state of Pennsylvania. Oh boy, let us see what Pennsylvania has to offer. And as a welcome gift, there's no Philly, we just get Oxford from 3 miles away. I do not like this at all. I want to see Philly. You were being signed for it since Bel Air, Maryland, and now you're dropping it, Pennsylvania. Come on. And then in Rising Sun, we're not getting signed north for Kennett Square. I mean, it's a bit better, but I want to see Philly still because, again, that's what we're being signed for in Maryland. And then here we meet with Pennsylvania Highway 41, and let us see what we're signed for on Pennsylvania 41. Hey, Philly does come back. Well done, PennDOT, you finally done something right. And here we meet with 322, we're now getting signed for Concordville. You wanna know what Concordville is? It's an unincorporated community. How about you sign Philly, or Media, or Chester, because those places are actual towns. I don't want to see Concordville here. And I forgot to mention this in the original video, but we actually also need US 202 here. And guess what US 202 is? Hey, I know this highway. US Highway 202 is a 629-mile route and a child of US Highway 2 that runs from Newcastle, Delaware at a junction with US 13 and 40, all the way up to Bangor, Maine at a junction with its parent, US Highway 2. Some other highways that meets is US Highway 1, US 322, and has a short concurrency with it, Interstate 95, and others. And Delaware does give us an end US Highway 202 shield, and like I said, US 322 and US 202 have a short concurrency in eastern Pennsylvania. US 202 mainly replaced US 122 in 1935, and is actually longer than the eastern half of US Highway 2, and is mostly a northeastern route. That's a little bit about US Highway 202, and let us get back to the great US 1. And here we split off from US Highway 322 as it's being signed for Chester, and we're now getting signed north for Media. I mean, that's an alright choice, but again, I prefer to see Philly here because US 1 is going to be going into Philly soon. And then here in Media, we're now getting signed north for Springfield. And this Springfield is an unincorporated community within the Philly metro area. Why can't you just sign Philly? What do you have against Philadelphia, PennDOT? Tell me. And here we are meeting with Interstate 476, and all around this intersection is terribly signed. We're still getting signed north for Springfield when we should be getting Philly, while 476 should be getting Interstates 95 southbound Control City and Allentown or Scranton. Come on, PennDOT. This seriously takes the cake for the worst sign intersection in the entire country. And then here in the outskirts of Philly, we meet with US Highway 30 here, and this is probably one of the lamest major to major US highway meetings ever. Well, I mean, I bet US 30 and 52 can not top this though. And then when we meet with Interstate 76, which is getting signed west for Valley Forge. No, that should be Harrisburg. While we're getting signed for Central Philly and the Roosevelt Expressway. And then we split off from Interstate 76, which will be the road that'll take you to Central Philly, while we're now going to become the Roosevelt Boulevard here. And then as we go through the city, we meet with US Highway 13, and this is the bridge that US 13 merges into US 1 here. And then US 1 and 13 have a concurrency as we head through the city, and this is where US 13 splits off to head toward this bridge. And then on the north side of Philly, we're not getting signed north for Morrisville. Excuse me, when did I come back to North Carolina? It should definitely be either Trenton or New York City. Morrisville is just an exurb of Philly. Why are you being provincial, PennDOT? We'll meet with Interstate 276 as we're now getting signed for Trenton, which is a good choice, while 276 is getting signed for New York and Harrisburg. Oh, so you put Harrisburg on 276, but not on Interstate 76 proper? What is wrong with you, PennDOT? And then here we meet with Interstate 295, which is getting signed for Princeton and Philly. And if you want to check out a video on Interstate 295, it's in the top right corner here. Here we meet the northern terminus of US Highway 13, getting signed south for Tullytown and Bristol, while we're now getting signed north for Morrisville and Trenton. And in our last pull through on US 1 in Pennsylvania, we finally get signed for Trenton in New York. I mean, you could also have New York since, I don't know, the US 13 split into Philly, not Morrisville. And after crossing over the Delaware River, we are heading through the city of Trenton. And here we go right under US Highway 206, which we sadly do not have a direct interchange with. And on the north side of Trenton, we meet with Interstate 295 once again. And we're now getting signed north for New Brunswick, which kind of makes sense because New Brunswick is still a pretty big city and a New York expert, because people will probably be taking 295 to 95 to get to New York City, while US 1 again is more of a local road. And on our way to New Brunswick, we meet with US Highway 130 here, which is being signed for Camden and New Brunswick. Now I meet with Interstate 287 here, and we're now getting signed north for Newark, which is a good choice. Here we meet the Garden State Parkway, and for some reason it does not have any control cities. Now we're meeting with US Highway 9 to start the US -8 concurrency. And here we meet the start of Interstate 278, which might be America's most urban 3-digit interstate, as we're still getting signed north for Newark, along with the Newark Airport. Here in the Newark area, we meet with the eastern terminus of US Highway 22, and US -8 is now going to be signed north for New York City, which is awesome. And then here we split into a truck route and a local route, while US 19 is now signed north for the Pulaski Skyway in New York City, while the truck route of US 1 and 9 are now signed for Jersey City. And here on the Pulaski Skyway, we get a cool view of the New York skyline. That is awesome. Here we meet with New Jersey Highway 139, which will take you to the Holland Tunnel, while we're going to be heading towards Jersey City and the Lincoln Tunnel. Here we meet New Jersey 495 / Interstate 495 / the Long Island Expressway. Why does it have like 700 different names? While we're getting signed north for Ridgefield Park now. Huh. I wonder what happened in New York City. Here in the Ridgefield Park area, we meet with US 46. They're now going to be concurrent with it as we head towards the famous George Washington Bridge. And then here we join with Interstate 95 as we're going to be crossing the George Washington Bridge. And we're also meeting at US 9W here. And since there is no street view on the George Washington Bridge, I just hopped onto the Hudson River here to take an awesome view of the bridge from this boat. And on the other side of the bridge, here in the heart of New York City, we meet with Interstate 87, the real one sadly, as it's getting signed for Albany and Queens, while we're now getting signed north for the Cross Bronx Expressway in New Haven. But immediately after that, we split off from Interstate 95 as we're now going to be heading through the Bronx. And in fact, we actually passed by the Bronx Zoo here, so that is cool. Now we're meeting the Bronx River Parkway, which is getting signed north for White Plains and south for Soundview Park. And here we meet with Interstate 95 on the northern side of New York City. And on Interstate 95, we're now getting signed for New Rochelle and the Pelhams. Here, as we're about to exit out of New York, we are now meeting with Interstate 287 once again, and this time it gets signed for White Plains too. And on Interstate 287, we're now getting signed for Port Chester and Rye Bread. And then after going through Rye, we're now entering into the state of Connecticut. So we begin here at the Connecticut and New York State line, where we don't have a Welcome to Connecticut sign immediately, but it looks like it's a little ways up the road here. And here's a closer look at that Welcome to Connecticut sign. I mean, it's nothing out of the ordinary, just a plain blue welcome sign. But we did get a Greenwich sign when we entered the town of Greenwich, which is our first town. And here in Greenwich we meet with Interstate 95, obviously, because we don't stray too far from it. And it's being signed for New York City and New Haven respectively. Now let's take a look to see what we're signed for on Interstate 95. Are you kidding me? We just get a couple of neighborhoods here in Greenwich? I mean, I don't like seeing neighborhoods being signed on US 1. You can actually put a couple of towns instead of neighborhoods. But this is a very common theme, as we do meet Interstate 95 a lot, and we get a sign for a lot of neighborhoods. Anyways, up the road, US 1 actually passes through downtown Stamford, Connecticut, and the only reason why I know of this place is because of the office. And then after going through downtown, we meet with Interstate 95 once again, and it just gets signed the same control cities, except New York City is not listed here this time. And let's take a look to see where I'm signed on Interstate 95 this time. Hey, we actually get an actual town. Welcome, well done, Connecticut. And here in Darien, we meet with Connecticut Route 136, as we're now getting signed for Norwalk, which definitely is a good choice. And here in Norwalk, we meet with US Highway 7, which will take you south to Interstate 95, and northbound will take you up to Interstate 84. And here we meet Connecticut Route 123, and we now get another oddity of US 1. We're now getting signed east instead of north. That is interesting. And here we get our first mileage sign with Fairfield now as our primary from 9 miles away. I mean, kind of makes sense because we are paralleling Interstate 95, and US 1 is more of a local road. And if you want to get to places beyond Fairfield, it'd be better off taking Interstate 95. And here's the map. As we can see, we're just paralleling Interstate 95 when you have multiple interchange with it, and we don't stray too far from it. Here in Bridgeport, we meet with Connecticut's Route 8 and 25 as they're a freeway through the city. And we can see that we meet Interstate 95 another time, and we're now getting signed for Milford, which definitely is a good choice. And after going through Milford and a couple other towns, we're now entering into New Haven, Connecticut. And like US 79, we don't have direct access to Interstate 91 and US Highway 5 here, sadly. You have to get onto Interstate 95 to access those two routes. And here we go over a drawbridge, and on the other side of that drawbridge, we're now become a frontage road to Interstate 95, and we still have exits for it. And then a ways up the road, we're now going to be joining with Interstate 95 here, as we're going to be heading towards Old Lyme and New London. And here we split off from Interstate 95, as we're now getting signed for Old Lyme. While 95 will take you to New London along with Providence. And after going through Old Lyme, we actually enter into downtown New London ourselves, and here's a look at the city. And after going through downtown, we're now joining with Interstate 95 for another time as we head towards Providence. And after crossing the Thames River, we're now entering into downtown Groton, as Interstate 95 will take you up towards Providence. And here you get another mileage sign with Mystic now as our primary from only 5 miles away. I mean, I don't know why you need a 3-liner for when the top 2 lines are literally the same exact distance. I mean, you could only have a 2-liner here in Connecticut. And then here we meet Connecticut Route 127 as we're now getting signed for Stonington, which is another 4 miles away. And here in the Stonington area, or Stonington, we get a sign for Westerly, Rhode Island now, which is a good choice. And here is the Connecticut and Rhode Island state border, and this is our second time that we'll be entering into Rhode Island. And our first major junction in Rhode Island is Rhode Island Route 78, as we're now getting signed for Newport, which I think is an awesome choice. And here we meet Rhode Island 138, which will take you over to Newport, and let's see what we're signed for on Rhode Island 138. You now get signed for Providence. Wow, that is awesome, Rhode Island. You're doing wonderful. But before we enter into downtown Providence, we actually pass by the Rhode Island International Airport here. And then we also meet our alternate route, which will go around the city as we head into downtown Providence. And before we make it to downtown officially, we meet Rhode Island Route 10 here. And US 1 will continue north into downtown. And here we go over Interstate 95 and US Highway 6 here. And we pass by downtown Providence here, which actually kind of looks like a nice little city. And then we actually do meet US Highway 6, which will take you over to Interstate 95 here. And then we now meet with US Highway 44. It's US 44, the road that I did for Thanksgiving, which you can check out in the top right corner here. And after splitting off from US 44, we're now going to be joining with Interstate 95 for a short time as we head through the northern part of Providence. And then we split off from Interstate 95 here in Pawtucket as US 1 will be traveling through the heart of Pawtucket on Broadway. And after going through Pawtucket, we now enter into the state of Massachusetts in Attleboro. And you can see that we're meeting Interstate 95 again, which is getting signed north for Foxborough in Boston, as we're still getting signed for Attleboro because we haven't made it to downtown yet. And then here in North Attleboro, we meet with Massachusetts and Rhode Island's Interstate 295 here, as it will take you into Warwick and over to Interstate 95 respectively. And then here, just south of Foxborough, we meet with Interstate 495, and I also did my own video on that. You can check that out in the top right corner here. Being signed north for Marlborough and south for Cape Cod respectively. And then here in Foxborough, US 1 actually passes right by Gillette Stadium, so that is cool. And then we can see that we're now getting signed for Boston and Norwood as our next control cities, which is cool. And it will take us to Interstate 95 too. And here in Norwood, we meet with Interstate 95 and the East Coast longest interstate and the East Coast longest US highway are going to have a wrong way concurrency here as we head towards Canada and Providence and Boston. And this is where Interstate 95 splits off from US Highway 1 to head south towards Providence, as US 1 is now going to be joining with Interstate 93. And on our way to Boston, we meet with Massachusetts Route 3 getting signed south for Cape Cod, as Route 3 North is now going to be joining with us to head towards downtown. And yes, I also did my own video on Massachusetts Route 3 as well, which you can check out in the top right corner here too. And here in the heart of Boston, US 1 and Interstate 93 meet the eastern terminus of the Great Interstate 90 here, so that is pretty cool. I'd like to check out Boston one day. And here we finally split off from Interstate 93 as we're now going to be signed north for the Tobin Bridge here. While 93 is being signed for. And here is the view as we're crossing over the Tobin Bridge here. And on the other side of the bridge, we're now getting signed for Saugus and Danvers respectively. Here in the Peabody area, we meet with Interstate 95 once again, as it's getting signed north for Portsmouth and south for Waltham and Gloucester. And this is here in the Danvers area, where we're meeting Interstate 95 another time, and we're now getting signed north for Topsfield. Here in Topsfield, we're now getting signed for Newburyport and Salisbury. And here in Salisbury, we're now getting signed north for Hampton, New Hampshire, which I think is an alright choice. And then a ways up the road, we're now entering into the state of New Hampshire, so let us see what New Hampshire has to offer on US Highway 1. And this is our first time entering into New Hampshire on this state, so that is awesome. And here we can now see that we're now getting signed north for Portsmouth, which is awesome. But the New Hampshire Route 107 junction, we're now getting signed north for Hampton still because we still haven't made it to Hampton. So it looks like they sign bigger places on smaller junctions, and on bigger junctions they sign the smaller places. And here in the Hampton area, we meet with New Hampshire Highway 101 here, and we're still looking signed for Hampton and Hampton Beach now. Our next junction, we now get signed for Portsmouth from 9 miles away, which is a good choice. Here in Portsmouth, we meet with Interstate 95 along with US Highway 4 as they're getting signed for Dover and Concord respectively. And then after going through downtown Portsmouth, we're actually crossing over this drawbridge here into the state of Maine. And hey, Maine does give us a welcome sign, so that is awesome. And our first major junction in Maine is Interstate 95, obviously. And we're now getting signed north for South Berwick. Interesting. Here in the South Berwick area, though, we're now getting signed north for York from 5 miles away. And here in York, we're now getting signed for Wells, Maine from a good 13 miles away. And here in Wells, we're now getting signed for Kennebunk from 5 miles away. And here in Kennebunk, we're now getting signed for Biddeford from 8 miles away. And it looks like going southbound we get signed for Kittery, so they're skipping the other towns. Interesting. And here in Biddeford, we meet with Interstate 95, or Maine's 195, and it'll take you over towards Interstate 95 or towards Main Route 5. And we can see here that we're now getting signed for Saco, which is the town that we're already in for some reason, and a Kentucky treatment. By our next mileage time, we get Scarborough on the top line from 6 miles away, and Portland now as our primary from 15. I agree with that. And here in the Portland area, we're going to be joining with Maine's Interstate 295, and we're going to have a concurrency with it as we head towards Portland and Falmouth. And still in the heart of Portland, we actually meet with US Highway 302 here, so that is cool. And then we finally spill off from Interstate 295 as it'll take you up towards Falmouth and Brunswick, while we get signed for Falmouth and Forsyth. So it looks like Maine knows how to differentiate between two highways that go to the same place. That is awesome. And here, I skipped ahead to the Falmouth area. We're meeting with the unsigned Interstate 495 or the Falmouth Spur. And for some reason, they're actually favoring US 202 here. Strange. But on that unsigned interstate, we're now getting signed north for Yarmouth, Maine. Here in Yarmouth, we're now getting signed for Brunswick, which I think is an awesome choice. And this here is in Brunswick. We're meeting with Interstate 295, and we're now going to become a coastal route as we're going to be following the Atlantic Ocean as we head through downtown Brunswick, and our next town is now Bath, Maine. And this here is the exit for US Highway 201, the only child of US 1 that is not in the Mid-Atlantic or Southern states. And we're now getting signed for Topsham and Bath and Rockland now, so that is pretty interesting. But our next place, we're now getting signed for Wiscasset. So what happened to Rockford, Maine, Dot? For our next mileage time, we actually get Wiscasset on the top line from 4 miles away, and Rockland now is our primary from 40. So why wasn't Rockland back on that other direction sign? And here in Rockford, we're now getting signed for Camden, Maine from 7 miles away. How many Camdens does US 1 pass through? And here in Camden, we're now getting signed for Belfast, Maine from a good 18 miles away. And here in Belfast, we're now getting signed for Ellsworth as our primary from 38 miles away now. And I believe Belfast, Maine is actually based off of Belfast, Ireland, so that is awesome. And then here in Ellsworth, we're now getting signed for Calais, so that is a good choice. But our next mileage time, we get Millbridge now as our primary from 27 miles away, so what's happened to Calais, Maine, Dot? And here in Mill Ridge, we're now getting signed for Calais once again, and this time it's a good 90 miles away. Even though Calais, Maine may not be a town worth signing from 90 miles away because of its population of only being like roughly 3,000, it is the biggest place that we'll be passing through until we get there, so kind of makes sense. Another cool thing about US 1 here is that it meets Main Route 189 here in Whitney, Maine, and Main Route 189 will actually take you over to Lubec, Maine, which is the easternmost town here in the lower 48 states. And it's also the town that's actually closest to continental Africa, so that is pretty cool. And skipping all the way up to Calais, we're now meeting with Main Route 9 here, and we're now getting signed for Holton from a good 90 miles away. And I definitely agree with that. And our next mileage time, we get Holton as our primary still from a good 83 miles away. And we literally pass through nothing until we get to Holton. We do meet Main Route 6 in the middle of nowhere here. And after passing that, we get another mileage time with Holton still as our primary from a good 54 miles away. And it looks like we do pass through another town, Danforth. And after going through Danforth, we actually pass by this overlook here, which is also known as the $1 Million View, and this looks absolutely stunning. I'd like to visit this in person one day. And then after going through rural Maine, we actually finally make it to Holton, where we meet with the great US 2 here. And US 1 and 2 are now going to be heading through downtown Holton and towards Interstate 95. And before we meet Interstate 95, US 2 splits off from us as it's getting signed for Island Falls, while we're now getting signed for Mars Hill. No, I'd rather see either Caribou or Presque Island, because those two places are actually bigger than Mars Hill. And then here we meet with Interstate 95 on the outskirts of Holton. And then in our next mileage time, we get Mars Hill in the top line, Presque Isle as our secondary, and Loring now as our primary from 61 miles away. So it looks like that Maine Dot is now favoring a military base here as our primary. That is very interesting. And here in Loring, we're now getting signed for Van Buren as our next town from a good 21 miles away. And here in Van Buren, we're now getting signed for Madawaska from 25 miles away, as Route 1A will take you up towards St. Leonard. And then here in Madawaska, we're now finally getting signed for a final place that US 1 will pass through, Fort Kent. And once we enter into the town of Fort Kent, we get an awesome mural on the side of this building here. And after passing the mural, we actually get a little dedication area for the ending of US Highway 1 here, with a couple of these cool plaques and a couple of bushes here. So that is an awesome way to end the great US Highway 1. So with that, we end US Highway 1 and we move on to the way it should be. So these are all the places that I think should be signed on US Highway 1. Starting off with Miami, then Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, West Palm Beach, Jupiter, Stewart, Fort Pierce, Vero Beach, Melbourne, Cocoa, Titusville, Daytona, then Bunnell because it'd be faster to take 95 to St. Augustine and Jacksonville. Then after going through Bunnell, St. Augustine, then Jacksonville, Callahan, Folkston, Waycross, Alma, Baxley, Lyons, Swainsboro, Louisville, Augusta, Aiken, Batesburg, Leesville, Lexington, Columbia, Camden, Cheraw, Rockingham, Southern Pines, Sanford, Raleigh, Wake Forest, Henderson, South Hill, Petersburg, Chester, Richmond, Ashland, Fredericksburg, Aquia Harbor, then Woodbridge, then Alexandria, then Arlington, DC, College Park, Laurel, Elkridge, Baltimore, Bel Air, then Outcoast signed the smaller towns with Philly in Pennsylvania. Then after going through Media, then just Philly, then Trenton, New Brunswick, Newark, Jersey City, the Great New York City, New Rochelle, Greenwich, Stamford, Norwalk, Fairfield, Bridgeport, Milford, New Haven, Brantford, Guilford, Madison, Clinton, Old Saybrook, New London, Stonington, Westerly, Newport, Providence, Pawtucket, Attleboro, North Attleboro, Foxborough, Norwood, Boston, then Peabody, Topsfield, Newburyport, Salisburyport, Seabrook, Hampton, Portsmouth, York, Wells, Saco, Scarborough, Portland, Falmouth, Yarmouth, Freeport, Brunswick, Bath, Rockland, Belfast, Ellsworth, Callias, Holton, Presque-Isle, Van Buren, Madawaska, and finally Fort Kent. Thank you all so much for watching this epic Northbound Supercut on US Highway 1. Again, I hope you got to learn a little bit more about the highway. Now you got to see all 3 videos of US Highway 1 together. And I hope you get to be on this highway someday, because I've been on a little bit of it. So with that, here are my next few highways. Next week we're going to be doing the Southbound Supercut, and then after that are these few highways. If you have any extra requests for any of these upcoming highways besides the special gimmick video here, please let me know down in the comment section below, and I'll make sure to shout you out once these highways release. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week when we do the Southbound Supercut.